The impudence, the audacity, the unmitigated gall of those Knuckleheads of Liberty podcasters, daring to voice opinions outside the mainstream of accepted thought. Listen if you dare. It's angry, it's funny, it's even sometimes sad, but it's always based on freedom and justice, as you will see. Here's our host, Jason McPhee.
Welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty. We are coming at you on November 14th, 2022, just a little less than a week after our midterm 2022 elections. And boy, I tell you, it is every day seems like we're just slipping a little bit farther into that Biden abyss. And I tell you, the midterm elections really didn't give us a whole lot of hope. And worst thing is we never see any libertarians elected, at least to the national office, which is kind of a bummer. But we do have a break from all that stuff for you today. We actually have a special guest. We're going to talk to Zach Greenberg. He is the senior program officer of student organizations and campus rights advocacy for the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, otherwise known as FIRE. So anyways, but before we jump into that, let me introduce you to the panel. In our upper right-hand corner, we have Leon, the word Brathwaite, last word in Liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. No Screaming Eagle with us today, but we do have our special guest in our upper left-hand corner, and that's Zach Greenberg, who just mentioned is from the FIRE organization. And essentially, you guys are pretty much it seems like you guys are a relatively new organization, at least maybe in the past 10 years or so, and you guys have really been sticking up for free speech on college campuses and maybe even expanding on that a little bit. Do you guys want to tell us a little bit about what your organization does and sort of how you guys got going?
I'd be happy to, and thanks again for having me. Yeah, so I'm a First Amendment attorney for FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, and we are a nonpartisan, nonprofit civil liberties organization that defends free speech and students' rights nationwide. We were founded in 1999, but very recently, we are now expanding off campus, defending free speech, First Amendment for all Americans. There's still a focus on college campuses nationwide, and we're still proudly nonpartisan, and we're here to defend your rights.
Awesome. James, can you give us the visual on this too? Okay, great. So yeah, you see they have a website. And by the way, if you're searching for it, it's not called FIRE, it's called thefire.org. So just in case you might get a little bit confused when you're searching for it. But so anyways, it's a place where you can go and find out a little bit more about what they're doing. And actually in our next show, we're actually going to talk about a few of the cases they're involved in currently too. But as far as your organization goes, so I guess you guys just recently sort of started up. It seems like you guys are really necessary because organizations like the ACLU, we always expected them to always stand up for free speech, and they seem to be bailing on some of these free speech cases nowadays. And so I guess that seems to be leaving an opening for you guys. Is that maybe part of why you guys started up?
Yeah, the ACLU have gone woke, to be honest. So yes, so please go ahead.
Yeah, we started up around 2 decades ago because our founders saw these really pervasive issues in higher education, with students being censored and indoctrination and professors being unable to teach and speak out. And since that date, we've been trying to put ourselves out of business. And it seems like we're doing a pretty bad job with that because it's getting worse each and every day. The issue of free speech, especially in higher education, is becoming more prevalent in our society, and focusing on and college campuses as kind of the backbone of the American academic experience and kind of the future proving grounds for our leaders. That's been very rewarding so far, but it seems like the culture of free speech and just the tolerance for opposing ideas has been deteriorating, not only in college campuses, but across our nation. So we decided to expand and try to become essentially a PR firm for the First Amendment, educating our fellow Americans on what free speech is, why it's important, and why we should defend it.
So roughly how many, opportunities do you guys have to interject yourself into some of these disputes at college campuses? It certainly seemed like a few years ago, especially while Trump was in office, there was just a ridiculous amount of times when conservative, speakers would come to campuses, and you'd see these massive crowds that would just sort of shout them away from the campuses. But I also noticed too that you guys do have cases where you guys are also finding that there is, I guess, a suppression of speech on the other side of the aisle as well. So.
Yeah, that's correct. We see censorship all across the political spectrum. If you think of really any viewpoint that's expressed in the college campus, both sides of it, pro and against Trump, pro and against Biden, even these, disputes like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We have vegan groups and hunting groups going at it. It's been censored on a college campus. And so every day is a new case. We get around 2,000 submissions for help every single year from students and professors at universities nationwide. And one of the best part of my job is sorting through all these submissions and saying, hey, how can we help? Should we get lawyers involved? Should we use blogs and public relations? Should we lobby? Should we write letters to them? Like kind of the Swiss Army knife approach to advocacy. And you're right that censorship seems to be a lagging indicator. Every issue that we talk about nowadays is going to be probably censored in the next couple of months. And so, for example, we started out, big issue, 2001, 9/11, right? We had professors being censored for talking about, what happened there and kind of our response to it. And of course, fast forward a couple of years, you got the COVID pandemic and professors and students being punished for their advocacy with that. And of course, you have Trump, that was a big issue. And nowadays we're seeing a lot of issues with election integrity and fraud and stuff like that. And so you can really imagine the wide berth of issues we see in a college campus being expressed and correspondingly being censored.
So Zach, how do you guys decide which case to get involved with? I mean, you said you have 2,000 submissions for help every year. I am assuming you cannot possibly get involved in all of them. So how do you decide which to take and which not to?
Unfortunately, we can't take every case. We have a limited staff here and limited time. We take the cases where the students and the professors have expressed themselves and their speech is protected by the First Amendment or by the university's free speech policies. And so we look at, what happened here? Why was the student punished? What were they saying? What was the context of their speech? And of course, there's exceptions to the First Amendment, right? True threats, harassment, obscenity. We can't get involved with that. But the speech is protected by First Amendment standards. We take the case.
I see.
Well, just curious, is it usually individual students or professors, or in the case of students, are they part of some club? Because like a lot of times we'll hear about, maybe it's a conservative club on campus and they're not allowed to have their table or something else, things like that. Are those the types of things you see more often, or is it maybe some individual where they're literally just saying something and they don't even have a group behind them?
It's a great mix. That's what makes it a great part of the job. We have individual students posting flyers on campus, perhaps flyers critical of the Chinese Communist Party, perhaps flyers just saying, lose the freshman 15, take the stairs. That were punished under university policies. And then, of course, we're student groups who they protest, they bring in speakers in universities, they get shut down with that. Universities say they can't even bring in speakers, can't even have the events, they can't have debates, they can't have bake sales, they can't have their protests, stuff like that. I work primarily with an organization, so I work with the College Democrats, College Republicans, fraternities, sororities, all sorts of advocacy groups out there. And it's funny how they're just trying to get out there and get their names and their viewpoints to the university and to the community out there, and they get censored and denied with depressing frequency.
So on the on public campuses, like say maybe the University of California, I mean, clearly there are First Amendment violations when the administration or some authority attempts to censor a student or professor on a public campus, because that is where the government is clearly involved. What happens? Do you all get involved in cases where it's on a private campus, say maybe on a Harvard or Yale? These are all private institutions. Do you all get in cases involving such universities where it's a private entity?
We do. That's a great question. And you're exactly right. Public universities are government institutions bound by the First Amendment. They're legally required, constitutionally required to to obey the First Amendment and to grant their students free speech rights. Private schools like my alma mater, Syracuse, upstate New York, they are not bound by the First Amendment. They do not are not required by the Constitution to give their students free speech. However, the vast majority of private universities like Syracuse promise students free speech, and their official policies and even their mission statement, they are founded upon this search for truth, the winning and sifting of ideas to create the best academic community. And so when these schools violate students' free speech rights, we'll advocate for the students and we'll say, look, this is a contract. You're making a promise to your students and you're breaking the contract. It's like if the students pay tuition and then they didn't get classes. If you're going to talk the talk, you have to walk the walk when it comes to free speech, even when it's difficult and unpopular to do so.
So in terms, again, on the private campuses, have you guys have any success in advocating for students, and using the contract, the breaking the contract, violating the terms of the contract? Do you all have success doing this?
We do. We're very grateful to say we have. The use of public pressure, publicity is really important for our mission and for advocating for students. Universities can seldom justify in public what they do in private, and they're actors in their community. They're out there. They don't want to have their reputations tarnished by being a school that's bad for free speech, that punishes their students, for example. And this happened, a case right in Philadelphia at UPenn, University of Pennsylvania, great school, right? And they told this hunting group they could not have their group. They could not be a group. They couldn't meet. They couldn't do anything because of the issues they were trying to advance, because they didn't want to have a hunting group on campus. And we said, look, this school promises free speech. They promise students to have the wide array of ideas. That includes being able to form groups to associate with other students in the furtherance of those ideas. And so we won that case. We got them an attorney, and now they're out there doing trap shooting, ski shooting, whatever they do, for the hunting club. Obviously, they can't use university money for ammo, but that's totally okay. But they're able to meet and have their activities.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay.
When you mention the money issue too, that does bring up one interesting aspect of, say it's a private college too, and maybe even if they didn't promise free speech, if they're taking federal money for I guess Pell Grants and student loans and all that kind of stuff, do they have some kind of an obligation for free speech in that case too, or does it matter?
It's a funny quirk of federal law where if you set federal funds, you're bound by all these statutes. You're bound by FERPA, which is student privacy statute. You're bound by Title IX, right, the big sexual harassment statute. But you're not bound by the First Amendment, unfortunately. So there are many schools that do, in fact, take federal money and are bound by all these different laws, but they don't promise free speech. We can't help them. Mostly private religious schools. And we call these schools warning schools, because students should be forewarned by going there that they vacate their free speech rights. That if you go to, one of these Southern Baptist universities, for example, which are great schools, nothing against them, they're great education. But if you complain to fire and say, hey, they're violating my rights, you look at the student code of conduct, you're like, well, it says right there that you can't criticize the school. So those are the rules you're bound by when you sign up for the school, when you matriculate, and unfortunately, we won't be able to help you.
Oh, I see.
Is that tied into statute or something behind the student loans, or is that some other broader law that is? I guess where does the authority come that it only points to free speech and not some of these other issues as well, like you said, Title IX and some of these others?
It's probably because these universities as institutions have their own First Amendment rights to fashion their own mission statements. So if a university wants to be a school that puts religious tenets above the First Amendment, above free speech, that's their prerogative. They can be a school that says we're going to have students go to church and believe in God and not commit blasphemy and not use the Lord's name in vain, above the value of criticizing religion, which is, of course, protected by the freedom of speech. So they can do that as long as they make their policies clear. Students are warned, they know what they're getting into with this school. We take issue with schools that have both, the hate, the anti-religious protections and also free speech. You got to make up your mind, right? You're going to be a school that either values this kind of free speech or that doesn't. And students, it should be clear to students what that actually entails.
But the First Amendment is an individual right. Okay, we're getting back to Jason's question. The First Amendment is an individual right. Now you are saying that the institution, as an institution, has a free speech right also. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's correct. Under First Amendment law, these corporations, nonprofit corporations such as FIRE, such as the Knuckleheads, Liberty, you guys going over here, have the right to have their own advocacy and have their own viewpoint. Individuals are just groups of people. And so under the Citizens United decision, the corporations have been well established to have First Amendment rights, and that they can, for universities, they can choose who they matriculate, who gets taught, who teaches, and what they learn. So it's really a matter of perhaps conflicting rights here. And so that's when it gets tricky and interesting. And usually with university, we just advocate that the policies are clear, students know what they're getting into, and that way FIRE also knows, what this university is and what they believe.
I see. Okay.
We're just curious. Well, what are some of the successes that FIRE has had? Because I've seen you guys interviewed occasionally. I know you guys have some prominent people that are associated with your organization, like I think Jonathan Haidt and some of those others. I think are so. Yeah. So I'm just curious. What are some of the big successes that you guys have had?
Sure, we have success in the individual level. Getting students who have been suspended or expelled from universities for protesting back at school, or at least get settlements and get vindicated their rights. Hayden Barnes was essentially expelled for protesting the university, Valdosta State, I believe, and getting him a settlement and advocating for him, finding him an attorney, and getting that justice for him was really important to us. And of course, we have students across the nation who have similarly been punished for their expression online, for their texts and group me's, and for even just raising their hand in class and putting their answers on tests. And we advocate for their rights to get their academic records cleared and continue their education. Also, in the larger level, we have a policy reform team that works with universities to revise their speech codes. They become better places for free speech, and curing these schools of their censorship and allowing students to have better policies protecting them affects tens of thousands of students out there, hundreds of thousands of students. Allowing the schools to become better free speech is really important to us. And then, of course, we have lobbying efforts, passing laws that outlaw free speech zones, tiny out of the way areas where students can protest, allowing those to be more expansive on campus. And of course, litigation victories, stopping unconstitutional statutes and allowing these universities to just become better places for free speech.
And I just find it so amazing that an organization like yours is even needed in the United States of America, where the First Amendment have been there since our inception, and well, the Second Amendment also, which is a big deal these days. But why? But just at a philosophical level, why is there a trend in the country that is leading us down this dark path of where we need organizations like yours to be defending the First Amendment?
It's funny you mentioned that. Like, a lot of the letters I write to schools, it could just be one sentence, right? Obey the law, just like follow the First Amendment, and that's it. But of course, they're pages and pages and pages of legal analysis and precedent and footnotes, and like it's the whole thing, right? Because you got to really make sure they understand what the law is here. Sometimes they don't understand what law they're breaking, what the First Amendment is, which I get. It's esoteric, it's weird, and so we try to just educate administrators even about this. But to answer the second part of your question, our CEO and president, Greg Luciano, Jonathan Haidt, psychologist, author of The Calling of the American Mind, New York Times bestseller. And it talks a lot about the culture of free speech. Like, what is free speech? Why do we defend it? And it's really depressing, because if the culture of free speech is deteriorating, then the law has no chance, right? Law is technically generally downstream from culture. Many countries out there promise free speech, but of course that means nothing if they're not going to back it up. And we try to instill these values in college students and professors and attorneys, anyone who really wants to listen to us, about just listening to opposing viewpoints, not demonizing those who think differently than you do, seeking out those who are smart, who have different viewpoints, and learning from them, and not trying to get people fired or punished or ostracized merely for a difference in opinion.
What's kind of interesting too, what kind of Leon, I think, was getting at with his question is, it's odd that aside from you guys having to be necessary, it's that it's necessary on college campuses. I mean, that should be the place where people are most open to being challenged.
Right.
Exactly. Yes.
So, yeah, and I suppose, I've listened to a few of Jonathan Haidt's talks, and I know he talked about how some of these have become echo chambers over over time, and maybe that's what's led to some of this intolerance of outside views. But it is funny though, because his discussion had to do with the social sciences sort of becoming left-wing echo chambers. However, you guys are finding issues of challenging free speech on both sides of the aisle, so it's not just in that direction. So.
Right. The whole echo chamber and just indoctrination and just a lack of curiosity for opposing viewpoints is really disheartening on a college campus, where you should have your deepest beliefs challenged. Liberal arts degree is about learning a diversity of perspectives and kind of bettering yourself through exposure to different ideas. And the process can be painful and uncomfortable, figuring out that perhaps the views you thought your whole life were wrong is definitely perhaps not a comfortable process, but it's necessary to become wiser, to become a better human being, and to understand the world around you. That's kind of why we advocate for free speech.
I know that you guys are non-political, and I'm not trying to put you in a box here, Zach, in any way, shape, or form. But are you all finding any trends in terms of where the violations mostly are coming from? Is it mostly from the right, from the left, from whatever? Is there some pattern that you guys are noticing?
It's funny because a lot of the individual cases we see in universities may be, administrators punishing students for conservative speech or for supporting Trump, for example. But in our internal analysis of cases, our metrics, we found that most attempts are actually non-political. It's like students trying to form like a student group about an issue, and they're being shut down because they can't have groups on campus, or because they're trying to save their university union from being taken over and they get punished for that. Or even the freshman 15 flyer. How do you characterize that? A student puts up a flyer saying lose, considers the freshman 15, they get punished for that. These are apolitical, kind of just like expansive, vague rules being used to punish students.
Is this because universities maybe are being overly sensitive to being sued, or is it because maybe that they're worried about students being triggered by just about anything nowadays?
Yeah, it's probably a combination of factors. The massive expansion of administrative bureaucracy at universities, right? A lot of administrators are out there whose job it is to police speech. We got bias response teams whose sole goal is to figure out, are students offended, how they offended, and how we can punish people for their offensive speech, which of course is protected by the First Amendment and free speech. Then you have students themselves who, until very recently, were a very pro-free speech body of the university, but somewhat recently, they've really gotten to be calling and demanding more censorship, that their colleagues and their fellow classmates would be punished for their speech. And actually, it's really disheartening to see. It kind of shows more about the culture of free speech, and we need to do a better job of educating people why it's important.
One of the things I like to ask too, if we have the time in interviews, is what are some of the challenges that are facing your organization? Because there's always, for maybe if anybody's thinking about trying to start up an organization or anything else, what are some of the pitfalls, or are there, I guess, bureaucratic challenges that you guys have to running your organization or anything like that?
Sure. There's internal and external challenges. Some of the internal challenges that we have people on this staff that have to defend speech that we disagree with. I'm Zach Greenberg, a Jew from New York, and we defend speech of people that are anti-Semitic, that are perhaps have neo-Nazi views. And I'm not saying it's easy, but it's necessary to defend free speech. It's part of the job. And we ask people when they come work at Fire, look, this is what you'll be doing. Are you okay with this? And the many organizations out there only defend liberal speech, only to defend, one type of speech, which is fine, nothing wrong with that. But to be a nonpartisan defender of free speech requires you to defend speech that you disagree with. And externally, we get a kind of a bad rap when it comes to who we defend and why we defend them. If we defend a communist, they go fire is a bunch of communists. Or we defend they go fire is a bunch of Trump supporters. And look at our staff. We have a very politically diverse staff of, I have my boss is a Green Party person. His boss is a Trump carrying Republican, and her boss is another, like left wing anti-war advocate. So it's really a staff of a lot of different political viewpoints, and it helps us when it comes to these speech issues because we can advocate for all sorts of viewpoints. And I guess the perception here is that we may be partisan, we may be right wing or left wing, but the reality is that we will defend your rights for free if they are censored on a college campus, and we try to get people to understand that and to ask for help when they are censored. They don't do this alone. They can come to us. We're here for you. We'll help you out.
The First Amendment is really for offensive speech, really, what people will deem offensive. That's what the First Amendment is for. It's not for speech that you agree with. It's for really when something is said that you may find offensive, and but the solution to for the problem of offensive speech is really and truly more speech.
That's correct.
Debating ideas and putting them out there and let the best man win, so to speak. Best person, I guess, in these political correct times. Let the best person win and let those ideas flourish.
More speech. We always say the answer to bad speech is more speech. It's not censorship or violence. It's just getting your voice out there. Have your own protest, your own speaker,
Yes.
and be heard.
Yeah. Zach, one of the questions I like to ask our guests, and hopefully we have enough time, but is, a lot of times these ideas of liberty, they're not the norm, I guess. A lot of times it's something that you're not taught in, essentially we have a government monopoly on the public schools. So you don't tend to hear these ideas about, market solutions and individual liberty as much as you might, maybe if we did have a more liberty-oriented education. And I was wondering, what was it that sort of rang your liberty bell on this stuff? What sort of woke you up to some of these ideas of liberty?
Yeah, when I was a freshman at SUNY Binghamton, it's a state school in upstate New York, I saw this Christian fundamentalist preacher talking about the sins of homosexuality and drug use and premarital sex, and really unpopular viewpoints on the college campus that folks overwhelmingly liberal. And there were calls to expel this person from the grounds, the student newspaper, the student government, the university administration. I realized that, that could be me. That could be anybody out there. Friends, family, loved ones, talking about anything remotely controversial. And by defending his rights, you're also defending the rights of everybody out there. It defends everyone equally, because everyone has an equal right to free speech. And if we censor him, we kick him off campus, it really affects all of us. And that kind of got me thinking about free speech, constitutional law, what's the First Amendment, going to law school, kind of doing this for a living. And I still believe in it very strongly that like you said, the answer to speech you don't like is more speech. To have your own counter protest, have your own movement. There's no reason why we have to limit ourselves. It's best part about America is we live in a pluralistic society and we have the right to protest and have a multitude of tongues to speak with.
Well, that's awesome. It's always great to hear what inspired somebody toward liberty. And by the way, we're just about to the end of the show. Are there any last messages you'd like to leave people with, or places where people can go if they want to contact you guys to either connect with you guys to get you guys to their campus or otherwise engage you?
Sure.
If they're looking for help.
Yeah, looking for help. You can always come to thefire.org. We have everything right there. All of our breaking news, bottom of the page, we have the submitted case. So if you need any help, you can confidentially ask us for assistance and we'll get back to you within a day, one business day, we promise that. And of course, if you'd like to have a speaker or just want more about FIRE, you can always submit an email to us, thefire.org. We're all right there, right in the bottom. You have fire@thefire.org right there. Give us a call and we're here for you. This is the best job I've ever had. Love working at FIRE. We get free bagels every Thursday, which is a New York Jew. Really much appreciate that. And it's grateful to work here and I'm grateful to come on your show.
Awesome. Well, it was so great having you. It looks like we just lost you. You must have clicked out. But, don't worry. We're going to have him back on the next show. And thanks so much, Zach, for being here with us. And thanks so much for joining us, our audience. And we'll see you at the next one. Till then, stay free.
Thanks for having me.
Indeed. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.